Okay, so thanks very much, everybody. And hopefully now, actually, this should be the most relaxing part of the morning so far, because I don't have to do any talking, really just ask some questions. But to get us started, I'd like to do a quick welcome to the panel. And I suppose this panel and this discussion is about agentic artificial intelligence in parliaments, right? So artificial intelligence is evolving rapidly, as we were saying, and you've heard on the other panels already, from tools that assist users to systems that can act with increasing autonomy. And this is where we really want to focus on the agentic aspect if we can. So carrying out multi-step workflows and interacting across systems is how that all is shifting and where things are going. So the shift towards agentic AI is already beginning to reshape how organizations operate. So in many sectors, particularly in the private sector, we're already seeing early signs of this transformation, not just in terms of efficiency, but in how work itself is structured, how roles are evolving, how tasks are automated, and in some cases, how workforce models are actually being reshaped. And we've seen a lot of that in Ireland recently. So for parliaments, this raises a complex set of considerations. These institutions, our institutions, must balance innovation with continuity, efficiency with accountability, and technological capability with democratic responsibility, okay? So the question is not only what can agentic AI do for us, but how should it be introduced in a way that preserves trust, institutional knowledge of the Parliament, and the central role of human judgment. So today we're very privileged to have an excellent panel of representatives with us, both from the internal parliamentary perspective and the external technology and industry perspective and expertise. And the people helping us frame the discussion today are Ato Saksrom, who's the Administrative Director of the Parliament of Estonia, Stephen Dwyer, who's the Senior Innovation Director at the US House of Representatives, Bruno Tomasi, who's the Chief Executive Officer at GovSys, and Kieran McCurry, who's the National Technology Officer for Microsoft Ireland. So I have a series of questions laid out for the guys, and they're all two-parters, so they're going to feel a lot of pressure to answer them in the 5 minutes that they're being given. But I might just start with the first question and skip the framing to save some time. So, and I think we'll start just left to right. So Ato, we might start with you first, if that's okay. So question one. From your respective, for all of you really, from your respective perspectives, inside and outside parliamentary environments, what does agentic AI practically mean in a parliamentary context from your perspective, and how can these systems be integrated into legislative and administrative processes without disrupting procedural integrity, accountability, and what does it mean for established ways of working? And if you just press your microphone, the camera will pick you up for people on the Zoom call and stuff. Thank you.
So thank you, Kieran. So very glad to be here. And to answer this question, I will start with a little bit behind of today's year. So our parliament has been fully digital since 2012, while still remaining some paper-based procedures as a backup we needed. But for us, digital tools are not simply a matter of convenience, so they form part of the core infrastructure of the modern parliament. And in that sense, artificial intelligence is the next step in much broader digital journey for us. It's already becoming a normal part of everyday life, and often without people even noticing it. So AI cannot replace human judgments, discussion, or responsibility, but it is developing rapidly and will become increasingly important in our daily work. We already use several AI-based solutions. It's a daily work. Since September 2020, plenary sittings have been transcribed with the support of a system called HANS, which records what is said in the chamber and converts into the text using the speech recognitions. And in 2024, we introduced an internal AI tool for use across the organization. It allows users to make low-risk queries based on our data, and also provides practical ways to build prompting skills. The system was trained only on our own open data. It is not mission-critical tool, and a more advanced language model can already offer similar functions as ours. Even so, it has played an important role in helping us learn, build confidence and strengthen our internal capabilities. In 2025, we added a simple chat and text generation capabilities. In simple terms, agentic AI means, for me, that it can do more than just respond on single questions. They can help plans search for information, compare documents, summarize debates, identify links between proposals, and support people through more complex workflows. In parliamentary context, that can be genuinely valuable. In my view, the real value of technology such as AI lies in integrating them into the parliamentary business process in ways that genuinely support our daily work. This system should help people do what they already do more efficiently and make routine tasks easier to manage. We have a long experience of connecting different systems and making them work together. And the same principle applies here. Before integrating AI across multiple systems, institutions need to look at the bigger picture, where integration truly makes sense, where the benefits are real, and where the expected value justify the investments. So, at the same time, we must just recognize that specific models, tools, and versions are changing very quickly, and not all of this technology are yet reliable enough for fully autonomous decision making, especially in legislation where mistakes can be costly. Final judgments must clearly remain with a human being. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ato. And Kieran, just the same question to you, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you, Kieran. Thanks very much, everyone, for inviting me here today. I suppose maybe just before I answer the question, Kieran, or get into the specific relevance of AI and agentic systems for parliaments, I might take a little step back to reflect on what we're seeing broadly across industry. And I think if you look back over the last 12 to 18 months, we've really seen a move away from people and businesses, I guess, looking at AI as a system by which you can ask some questions and get some answers. And really now starting, as you rightly say, Kieran, and framing your question into how we can look at agentic AI to transform how people do work. We conduct a lot of research globally in Microsoft, and some research we conducted recently, both locally in the Irish market and globally as well, shows a really high number of businesses, typically in excess of 90%, that are either already using AI to some extent or certainly plan to use it within the very near future. But a relatively small number of businesses that we might define as frontier usage, so really advanced usage of AI. So I think there is a high watermark of adoption right across businesses and presumably in parliamentary settings as well for AI as a tool to be an assistant or to augment human capability. But I think consistent with what we see globally and across multiple industries, we're really just starting to look at what the opportunities are for how AI can be used to really make a difference to workflows and business processes. So the challenge now that we hear from all of our customers, whether industrial or public sector or academic or whatever, is there's a real desire to understand how can I operationalize AI to make a difference to the way that I conduct business. And I think that's very much true in the parliamentary settings as well. And I think the challenges are very real and very substantial within parliamentary settings for how AI can be used in an agentic setting rather than simply a tool to aid individual productivity. But that's not to say that it's not doable and it's not possible. And indeed, it very much is possible. But I think when we look at this in the parliamentary setting, you're looking at using tools that can, to some extent, plan and decide and execute tasks. And when you look at AI from the agentic perspective, again, it's simply not asking a question, it's getting an answer. In an agentic setting, it's setting an objective and instructing an agent to say, go and do some tasks for me and come back with a set of answers and completed subtasks. And I think then you talk, Kieran, about how can we use AI practically in a parliamentary setting without disrupting integrity. And it's the without disrupting integrity piece that we really need to apply a lot of focus to, because especially in parliamentary settings where, you know, the very heart of democracy, it's really important that integrity is maintained. And you know, forever since we've been talking about AI, we've always talked about ensuring a human in the loop to provide oversight and to provide governance. And I think in a parliamentary setting, there's maybe a slightly different version of that. It's almost like AI in the loop, right? So it's these are human oversight and human regulated tasks, but with AI just automating some of the processes. So I think that sets a good kind of framework for what we need to think about. What are the big concerns? What are the guardrails? What are the safety nets we need to think about from an AI perspective within parliamentary settings? And then practically what that looks like. Again, it's not simply about removing human capability and replacing it with artificial intelligence capability. It's about using AI agentic capability to augment human capability at large scale. And I think, and you know this much better than me, but the volume of information and data that everyone has to deal with in parliamentary settings is huge. And if you can use AI to get through more of that faster and perhaps with some more precision, I think that's a really, really great benefit. And I think we see good examples of that in various settings. And again, I'm sure in many of your own parliaments, there are excellent examples of where AI is being used practically and veering into the territory of agentic systems. It could be transcription, it could be as an aid to drafting legislation or for research purposes. I think there's some excellent work ongoing. I'm sure our Brazilian colleagues would talk about the Ulysses system, how apt given the city that we're in, the Ulysses AI system that they're using there, and also in the Italian Senate, where there's a lot of AI being used to look at clustering of amendments. So these are historically very human tasks that were very labor intensive and quite difficult to do. And I think, you know, going back to my point about using AI to augment human capability at scale with volumes of data is probably the most important focus area that we can have for AI in a parliamentary setting.
Brilliant, thanks very much. Yes, and things like the Ulysses example in Brazil are very interesting, and I think, you know, they're really leading the way for parliaments. Stephen, sorry, just same questions to yourself, but in terms of agentic and its practical context in terms of parliaments, and then the integration of those. Thanks.
Sure. Hello, welcome everyone. So what does AI agentic mean in a parliamentary context? From my perspective in the US Congress, I think there's sort of two ways that I see a whole lot of it. One is from the institutional side, for which I work and which most of you all work. And, you know, we're really adopting it like we would any other new technology, you know, like maybe a decade ago with cloud technology, where we are, you know, there's an urgency because, of course, the great potential that AI has. So we're adopting it more rapidly than other technologies. But we're just carefully considering it and testing it in many of our, to fulfill many of the tasks that we have traditionally fulfilled. And so some of the examples you've already heard is certainly transcription, captions, translation. Those are things that you know, we're well along and we're doing with AI and having great success. The second category that I think is a little more exciting that we're getting a lot of pressure from, you know, about 85% of our staff are not institutional. They are the members and the staff and the committee staff and the leadership offices, and they're all very excited about agentic AI. And so, and one of the things we have to do is empower them with the latest technologies, but also keep it safe for the institution. And so that's kind of a wild west right now for us, where when we first authorized ChatGPT, was our first sort of trial LLM, almost 2 years ago. When we first did that, the smart staffers, quickly learned, well, you can get not just basic usage, but you can get more agentic usage if you make custom GPTs. And so lots of staff were making very advanced, complex custom GPTs, 2 years ago, that did very specific tasks, repeatable tasks that they could iterate on, that they could essentially code in plain language, which is really powerful. And so, and that's evolved. We've adopted Copilot as an institution, which is our first big tool for AI that we've also authorized for sensitive data. So that is our recommended tool for most of our staff. And same thing, they got the agents tool, which is similar to custom GPTs, where staff are doing really exciting, cutting edge things in more agentic ways. But they also run into the limits of those tools. Those tools cannot usually be, whether it's custom GPTs or Copilot agents, they can't be set to run every morning, or they can't be, they run into limits on how much processing can be used and everything. So we have a number of our offices that are demanding cloud compute and cloud space to take their AI app to the next level. And so, we do this in a couple ways. In the U.S. House, we do this through AWS and Bedrock. We also do it through Azure and Copilot Studio, and so we're trying to enable this, but it is very difficult because the demand for these types of custom apps is exploding, and it's very hard for us. Our cybersecurity team really struggles. How can we control all this? How can we protect the institution? How do we even know what all these AI things are doing? And so it's an exciting time. But to the second part of your question about how to maintain the integrity of these systems, I think it's important, especially for the institutional versions, what the members and committees are doing, that's all sort of some of their own risk. But from the institutional side, I think as we implement all these new AI capabilities, we are careful not to turn off the traditional capabilities. We want to have them run in parallel to confirm their accuracy and their integrity. I would say that integrity is an interesting concept with AI. It's somewhat one of the biggest obstacles that we've run into in implementing AI in the U.S. House has been the integrity argument that LLMs are inherently somewhat untrustworthy. They give different answers every time you ask them for repeatable questions. They make mistakes. They hallucinate. And so it's something we've really struggled with. But I think the argument we keep making is you just have to balance the usefulness of the AI tool versus the perfection you may get from a non-AI tool. So transcripts is a good example. The human-made transcript is definitely superior. It has less errors. Now, of course, that gap is shrinking. AI is pretty close. But the immediacy of the AI transcript is something that the humans just can't keep up with. And so we really just need to do both. We need to provide the immediate transcript, fully disclose transparency that it's AI generated, but that is a very significant feature that staff and members really want. When a hearing ends, they want to know what happened in that hearing immediately. And our human transcribers often would wait days, or would they give members opportunity to correct the record before they'd release the record, and things like that just were not practical. Well, AI gives us a very practical solution to this. And so I think you just have to balance that. Yes, the AI generated transcript might have some errors, but it is immediate, and that there's a huge utility to that. And so another area that we work on, and this is with summaries of legislation and amendments. A lot of the people that make those are great professionals that do an excellent job at making legislative summaries, but they can never handle the workload of doing summaries of all the legislative text that's proposed because there's just not enough of them. We can't afford it. And so AI can bridge that gap. And as long as we publicly disclose that this summary was made by an expert when this summary was made by I think it can sort of give us a little protection that the AI summary, of course, will have some mistakes. It won't be as good, at least now, as the professional made summary. But there's still utility because those professionals were only getting to 10-15% of summaries for all the bills that are currently before the U.S. Congress. AI can, of course, immediately get to all 100%. So that's an interesting thing that we're struggling with in integrity, is that, yes, these might lack some of the integrity of humans, but there's still utility, and that's just a balancing act.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Yeah, very interesting to hear that integrity point and the balance of efficiency and, I suppose, accuracy, and trying to find the balance there in the world that we live in. I think we've Bruno next. And Bruno, am I right? You have a presentation? Yes, some slides. And we can plug it in over here if that's okay. And that should allow you to do that. So just bear with us for a moment. Hopefully it stretches all the way.
Sure. I will make it by the.
I don't know if you have access to do that.
No.
I think you're just an attendee.
The Luis saying that is okay.
It's the translators own this.
So while we're going through the technical issues here, I might just say that it's very interesting at the panel level to have the internal and the external perspectives, right? So, Bruno and Kieran coming from this broader base of experience and input from other parts of society and other industries. And then, of course, the challenges we as a group and this collective face day to day at the parliamentary level. So Bruno is representing that outside perspective as well and has a background in the legislative area. So hopefully that will show.
Let me just change the screen. Okay.
Perfect. Okay. Over to you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I will say my speech in Portuguese. Then, if you could put the phones or if you could understand me, this is okay. Eu preparei uma apresentação rápida, tá, para poder falar sobre esse assunto que é tão importante. A gente teria alguns minutinhos antes para falar, então eu criei uma apresentação em inglês, aí fica fácil para quem não me entender em português, ver a apresentação em inglês. Bom, rapidamente, eu que estou aqui, Bruno, sou da GovCIS, a gente já está atendendo câmaras de vereadores há 18 anos, nós trabalhamos com inteligência artificial nos nossos sistemas legislativos, nós criamos a primeira inteligência artificial do Brasil, focada em legislativo. E nós temos hoje dezenas e milhares, no caso de usuários, e dezenas de câmaras utilizando os nossos sistemas. E eu vim aqui trazer algumas reflexões sobre a questão de processo legislativo com inteligência artificial agêntica, que é o foco hoje aqui da apresentação. Então, o que a gente nota ao longo desses 18 anos é que os parlamentos eles criam toneladas de documentos, e muitas vezes esses documentos vão para o arquivo e não são utilizados. Eles acabam sendo enterrados, de certa forma, dentro de uma pilha de documentos, e que quando a pessoa necessita localizar esses documentos, ela não consegue. Ou ela vai ter que buscar por uma palavra-chave, ela vai ter que fazer de alguma forma, digamos que às vezes ela não vai achar aquilo que ela precisa dentro de um contexto que ela está precisando. Ela até pode localizar o documento, mas ela ainda vai ter que ler todo aquele documento para entender se aquele documento faz sentido dentro do contexto que ela está buscando. Então isso a gente até consegue fazer com algumas dezenas de documentos. Mas quando a gente está tratando de milhares de documentos, como é que a gente faz isso? A gente começa a ter um belo de um problema. A gente tem ali, no caso, os pareceres de comissões, a gente tem as pesquisas que são feitas pelas comissões, a gente tem diversos documentos sendo produzidos, e esses documentos vão sendo acumulados. A IA agêntica, ao meu ver, ela pode se absorver de todo esse conhecimento produzido pelo parlamento. O parlamento ele produz esse conhecimento e ele acaba sendo esquecido de um ano para o outro. Passa um ano e tudo que foi feito no ano anterior, de certa forma, se perde. Então eu vejo como isso uma oportunidade que a gente tem agora de mudar essa situação. Então, como eu comentei anteriormente, digamos que a gente tenha, por exemplo, 10 mil documentos. Se a gente jogar isso dentro de como é que eu vou dizer assim, dentro de uma IA, diretamente fazendo uma indexação nela, ou até dando um contexto grande para ela, ela vai perder informação, ela não consegue manter, né, essa informação dentro de um contexto, porque ela vai estar tendo muitos documentos para processar. Então ela vai ter uma janela de contexto que esses documentos irão se perder. Então ela vai perder a precisão. Quando a gente trabalha com uma IA agêntica, ela possibilita que a gente consiga utilizar outros recursos para encontrar essa informação, extrair o que a gente precisa dessa informação e colocar isso dentro de um contexto já resumido. E se eu precisar do documento original, eu vou atrás desse documento original e lá eu terei toda a informação completa. Então eu vejo ela como uma ferramenta nesse sentido, principalmente da busca e extração de documentos. Mas eu acredito também que ela não deve ser apenas reativa. Atualmente, os agentes que a gente vê sendo utilizados, eles são reativos. Mesmo que você dê uma tarefa, ele vai trabalhar até concluir aquela tarefa, correto? Porém, ele não vai te propor algo, né? Ele vai simplesmente executar aquela tarefa, quebrando ela em diversos pedaços, né? Lá na última pergunta eu vou até transcrever, falar um pouco sobre isso, mas ela vai quebrar isso em pequenas etapas até ela acreditar que aquele resultado está bom, digamos assim. E aí ela te devolve, né, essa resposta. Mas quando a gente vai trabalhar aqui, no caso, com uma IA agêntica, que eu acredito que é o futuro, de fato, que é onde a gente está buscando aqui, entender aonde nós deveríamos chegar, ela deveria trabalhar por si só. Ela deveria detectar o que está acontecendo na realidade da sociedade e ela mesma propor soluções. Não apenas reagir àquilo que já está o problema posto na mesa. Né? Digamos que, por exemplo, a gente comece a ter algum problema na sociedade, está saindo notícias, etc. Ela poderia varrer essas notícias, identificar lacunas legislativas e, a partir disso, ela propor, né, algum tipo de trabalho para uma comissão, para um parlamentar, para a pessoa responsável por levar isso adiante. Né? Isso se torna uma inversão do processo do uso da inteligência artificial atualmente, que basicamente é fazer perguntas e receber respostas. Ela passa a fazer perguntas dentro da sua própria base de contexto e ela passa a propor soluções e não apenas respostas. Nesse sentido que eu estou dizendo, então, né, existe um conceito chamado Zero-Click Government, que é utilizado já em alguns executivos, se eu não me engano a Estônia, inclusive, já tem utilizado esse conceito de predizer o que o cidadão vai precisar. Eu acredito que isso deva ser levado para o contexto legislativo, que é, no caso, ao invés de esperar que o cidadão vá consultar algo, preencher um formulário, ele já receba uma informação, olha, você tem alguma situação que você precisa resolver agora. Você pode simplesmente confirmar ou a gente vai resolver sozinho em X dias. Você já está dando uma solução para aquele problema, não apenas identificando que o problema existe, mas já está propondo a solução. Então, eu acredito que essa IA do futuro agêntica, ela deve monitorar, ler, conectar, pensar e, a partir disso, revelar aquilo como uma solução. Certo? Essa é a diferença grande que eu acredito que a gente vai ter daqui para frente com a IA agêntica. Né? Imagine essa situação. Você chega de manhã, houve alguma notícia que causou um impacto muito grande na sociedade, né? Está tendo algum assunto nas redes sociais, essa IA agêntica está monitorando essas informações e ela mesma vai levar isso às comissões, vai levar isso aos parlamentares. Porque senão a gente vai sempre depender do executivo tomar essas iniciativas, que é onde normalmente funciona. Atualmente, boa parte, pelo menos no Brasil, das proposições legislativas partem do executivo. Eu acredito que isso se repita em boa parte dos parlamentos, né, que há a possibilidade do parlamentar também propor soluções. Mas a gente tem que nesse caso, passar a ser proativo, buscando essas informações antes mesmo, né, de a situação se tornar um problema para a sociedade. É nesse sentido que eu acredito que a IA agêntica ela pode ajudar. Ela vai propor soluções, mas ela não irá decidir nada. Ela não vai votar um projeto. Ela não vai dizer se você deve ou não fazer. Ela vai te propor alguns tipos de situações e você vai decidir. Quero seguir adiante, eu acredito que isso não faça sentido, sim ou não. É o human in the loop que eles falam, né? É dessa forma. Porém, não simplesmente quando eu peço uma ação, mas sim ela me trazendo soluções. E eu decido se eu vou levar adiante ou não. Basicamente, essa é a minha resposta sobre a primeira pergunta. Obrigado.
Thanks very much, Bruno. So just want to move on to the second question here, and really it's a bit of a deepening of what we asked in the first round, and that's deliberate. And I might just pull in some of the things some of the people have said in the opening. So the question, framing for the question is, look, as agentic AI becomes more capable, which is kind of what we're beginning to talk about here, and gaps narrowing with proficiency versus speed. You know, we're already seeing impacts in other sectors, particularly in the private sector. In Ireland, we have a lot of foreign direct investment of IT firms, and recently we had 20% of the workforce cut here in Meta, which is double the global workforce cut percentage that was made. So we're very keenly aware of those kind of changes at the moment. So automation is reshaping roles, functions and workforce structures as a result. And I suppose that brings up key risks for parliaments to consider. So Atto, I suppose the two questions, so the group know what they are, is what are the key risks parliaments need to manage then, particularly around oversight, accountability, trust and misuse? And then how should institutions think about the human impact of automation, which kind of leads into the example Stephen was speaking about. And I think those examples are undeniable, but their impact needs to be thought through carefully at the institutional level. So how will roles evolve? How will staff be supported through change? And how transparency can be maintained with both internal and external stakeholders? Thanks.
Thank you for the question. So, in general, the risks are similar to those we see with any new unknown technology. But in my opinion, in parliamentary settings, they become especially sensitive because of the importance of trust, accountability, and procedural integrity. If a system can search for information, make suggestions, draft summaries, or trigger workflows on its own, it must always be clear who is supervising that process, who is checking the results. In a parliamentary context, it is not enough to say that system works well. People also need to understand what the system is doing, which source it relies on, and where its limitations lie. Responsibility for the output must remain very clear. If AI is used to produce and analyze a summary of recommendations, the final responsibility must stay always with the person. It should not disappear behind the system, the software, or some other technical process. Trust is it's another key major issue. Parliament work depends on public confidence. If people feel that decisions are being prepared in a way that is opaque, or that AI is influencing the process without proper visibility, that confidence may weaken. Transparency does not mean publish every technical detail, but it does mean offering a clear explanation of roles, boundaries, and some control mechanism. The human impact of automation must be treated just as seriously as the technical risks. AI will change roles, but that does not have to mean that people become less important. On the contrary, many roles are likely to move more towards supervision, interpretation, quality control, and maybe even substantive advice. Routine work may decrease, but the need for human judgment, contextual understanding, clear reasoning, and ethical assessments will rapidly grow. Staff must be supported through these changes. That means training, practical guidance, safe opportunities to experiment, and clear message that AI is a tool for work, not hidden replacement for people. People need to know when they use AI, when not to use it, how to check its results, and who to turn to if the problem arises. Change management in this area has to be inclusive, not purely technology driven. In 2025 and 2026, our aim has also been to bring in external training to the staff, and the MPs who are interested can learn simpler and practical ways to use AI in the work. especially for prompting and for preparing AI-supported analysis. So on that basis, and using public data, our employees will be able to use AI for a range of practical different tasks, such as the initial reviews, draft legislation, searching for background information, preparing for meetings, and for every different producing even the meeting summaries. So, thank you.
Thanks, Ato. And then I think same question to you, Kieran, and it might be interesting to maybe pick up on some of the aspects Ato's outlined there about that change management aspect and really what that means from your perspective. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Kieran, and thank you for those comments as well. I think the biggest risk associated with AI in parliamentary settings is the risk that artificial intelligence will disrupt the central notion of democratic representation itself. I mean, that at a headline level is the absolute biggest risk. But I think you can break that down into sort of more sub-risks, if you want to look at it that way, and maybe just initially at least reflect on some of the points that Ato made, just in terms of accountability. All right, if we're looking at using agentic systems to perform tasks, not just to provide answers, but to perform tasks, that naturally begs the question, well, who's accountable and who is responsible for some of the actions that arise from the execution of those tasks? Is it an agentic system itself, or is it the person that instructed the agent to go and do something? Or indeed, is it the supplier of an agentic system or those responsible for maintaining it? So responsibility for AI-driven actions becomes really, really important. Ato mentioned the point as well about transparency and opacity, right? I think it's really important that any decisions or any information or any guidance provided by an agentic system is able to be inspected and scrutinized, and it's clear and transparent how it reached that conclusion. And as Stephen pointed out earlier, the challenge is sometimes is if you ask an AI system a question and you get an answer and you subsequently ask it the same question again, you may not always get exactly the same answer. And there are reasons for that, but we need to be able to stand over the outputs from those kinds of systems. I think another challenge, which maybe has not been picked up on already, is in project management, one might call this scope creep, but this notion of drift in terms of maybe an agent being put in place through good governance practices that suggest, well, here we're going to build an agent to perform a particular task. And then suddenly you find that agent that had a well-defined framework for what it was meant to do suddenly is being adapted by individuals. You mentioned this earlier, Stephen, about people using LLMs and then using custom GPTs to go and perform their own tasks. So I think that's a challenge if agents start acting beyond the scope and the control that was originally contemplated for how those agents might operate. And there's a question of governance associated with that. And then finally, I think that rolls up into the broader notion of trust. And when you've got automated systems providing answers and perhaps executing important tasks, to what extent can you confer a notion of trust into society that the parliamentary systems and the executive or whatever it is acting in a way that's consistent with democratic wishes? So that notion of trust becomes problematic. And I think the mitigation to this is relatively straightforward, and it's the mitigations that are the same as we ever had. It's about good governance frameworks in place. But unfortunately, going back to what I was talking about earlier, when we look broadly across industry and globally with respect to the adoption of AI systems, one of the biggest weaknesses and one of the biggest areas for improvement that we found was having good governance in place. So many entities are rushing in to put AI systems in place without having the proper foundations around governance and trust and good controls. And I think especially in parliamentary settings, there are areas that we can look to get good guidance, and that the 2024 AI guidance for parliamentary operations provides a good baseline for that. So it's important that there's good governance put in place in the first instance. Stephen also mentioned earlier, sorry to pick on all of your comments, Stephen, but Stephen also mentioned earlier about the fact that these AI systems make mistakes. And that's okay, because our elected representatives make mistakes too, right? But it's not about the fact that new technology makes mistakes. It's fine for them to make mistakes. One just has to be able to detect when a mistake has been made and to mitigate for it. And I think that's probably the most important thing that needs to be done, because mistakes are a human failability, and they're a artificial intelligence failability as well. So long as we can put the good controls in place to recognize mistakes and to respond to them, I think that's useful. And then just basic, I suppose, good hygiene practices in terms of how we operate systems, in terms of red teaming and adversarial testing, will go a long way. Just to finish up, I know we're tight for time, but just on the second part of your question, Kieran, about the human impact. I don't think there's any doubt that AI is just an amazingly transformative technology. And of course, there will be some kind of impact or dislocation into the workforce, regardless of what industry it is, including in parliamentary settings. And I think we all, to some extent, and it's easy to say this, have to come to terms with that. But to some extent, that is the price of progress, that old roles get shifted into new roles. There are many professions that were identified in the 1920 census, 100 years ago, 100 plus years ago, that no longer exist today. My favorite being the elevator operator, right? I mean, that was an important role for very many people, but no one has an expectation now when you walk into an elevator that someone is going to say, which floor would you like, and press the button for you. So AI in parliamentary settings will cause a shifting of roles. I don't think necessarily, at least in the first instance, that many jobs will disappear. But I think what getting back to my point from earlier is that I think what's going to be able to happen is that the sheer volume of work that is present for all of us will be able to be automated. So individuals in those roles will be able to do more. They will not be put out of jobs by machines. They'll just be able to operate and operate at a speed and a scale that we haven't seen previously. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thanks very much, Kieran. I think you've touched on something very big there, which is going to feature, I think, across panels later today, breakout rooms, and across the rest of the week, certainly on the governance side of things. And I think that's a really deep conversation that we need to get into as a group, and I'm sure people are already. But every time we come together, it's very interesting to get a sense of what people's version of governance is. Stephen, I might just put a bit of a flavour on your response or add something to yours, if that's okay, because I thought it was very interesting that Kieran brought up the broader notion of trust. And where I go to with trust there, as well as governance, is I suppose what we have here in Europe, which is the EU AI Act, right? And it adopts a risk-based framework to AI. And I'm wondering, from another Western democracy, but not sitting under the same regulations and legislation that we have here in Europe, how that's maybe being interpreted or acted on in the US as well. Thanks.
Sure. So specifically in the House of Representatives, we adopted a pretty comprehensive AI policy, which unfortunately we have not published publicly, but I can speak to it broadly. It says that Congress is able to use AI tools, approved AI tools, for approved AI use cases. So it's a two-part test. We review all the tools for security and legal and other issues, but then we also review the specific AI use cases. And we have a long list of approved use cases. We only have one item on there, which is a non-approved use case that might grow in the future. But right now, it's just deepfakes that we do not allow. And yet we still get many members, it's funny, it's aside, we get many members actually ask, can we deepfake ourselves to save time in video recording? Because that's how great the deepfakes are now. We have to tell them, sorry, that's not an allowed AI use case. But so our governance, at least internally within our parliament, we did very clearly lay out very early in the game, almost 2 years ago, and it is published internally for all of our congressional staff, and so we follow that. I'm gonna return the favor to Kieran and jump on some of the points he made. You know, the broader question of workforce. I think I'm one to think that especially within parliaments, we're not at risk of AI impacting workforce. This is a concern I hear from workers within our U.S. Congress often, but I don't think it's anywhere near. I think we benefit from the fact that we are chronically underfunded and understaffed, and we're chronically busy. There's always work to do. So I think what I've seen is that AI can, save each of us a few hours a day, perhaps. That's not going to go to waste. That's not going to result in anyone losing a job. That's just going to allow us to do, hopefully, some more meaningful work for those couple hours rather than the menial tasks that AI is helping us with. So that's my general thought. Now, I also agree that like elevator operators, there are tasks that will be replaced. I love a number of our stenographers, and I think their job is safe for at least a number of years. But I do think eventually AI might take over that area. But I have a colleague who has this general rule. He says that the AI's usefulness is proportional to the user's ability to judge the results. And I think that's a very important fact. And that speaks to how all of our experts cannot be replaced by AI, because the AI is kind of worthless without the expert's ability to validate the results. So think about a coder. All these people vibe coding. Occasionally it works and it's pretty cool or whatever, but a good software engineer knows how to use a tool like Claude Code to get results, and then to be able to analyze the results of how useful those results are, and then to be able to practically use them in more advanced ways. The same is true with a lawyer. If you use an LLM tool, and they have specialized tools now for law, and you get legal results out of it, if you can't interpret how accurate those are, well, it's all just a wasted activity. And so that's true in legislative contexts. A number of our legal bill drafters are experimenting with using AI to draft bills. Only they can know whether or not those various bill drafting tools have any value. And that's true in evaluating a tool, but it's also true in a just day-to-day using of the tool. You need to have the expertise to monitor and review the results that are coming out of any tool like AI. So I think that's an important tool that point to make about the value of experts. And I think all of these experts need to be empowered to use AI to hopefully save them a few hours a day and to get more work done and be more efficient. But that does not devalue the expertise itself. And then in terms of workforce, one important thing that we did when we rolled out our various AI tools, just the general tools, for example, Microsoft Copilot, when we rolled that out to the entire House of Representatives, we did spend an awful lot of time on training. And, someone like me, I'm sort of tech forward. I've been, playing with LLMs every day since they came out. I kind of didn't see the value of the training. I'd watch these trainings and they were just super basic. But when we surveyed our users, many of which are very brilliant people, half of them were not using LLMs in their personal lives, and they really had no idea, and they were somewhat fearful, and they didn't really understand. And so it actually really was useful. Microsoft was a good partner in this, by the way, of just having basic trainings on all the various ways to use it, and a lot of them are sort of basic levels before you would even consider any of the more advanced levels. And those trainings were very, very helpful. And I would say that when we got the generic trainings that I'm sure every small business in the world is now using for all their staff as they introduce AI tools, those were not as useful. But we took the time to customize those trainings and make our own trainings based on those, but in the context of our legislative staff. So we had, special AI classes for bill drafting and for legislative work. We had special AI classes for communications and communication staff, and for so lots of different persona-based, very relevant to our staff trainings for these tools that we're rolling out. So I think it's very important to consider that, and to consider the fact that a lot of the people are not like us, so tech forward with and knowledgeable about these AI tools. And one final point on transparency. So back to Kieran's first question of me of just our policy. Other things our policy does is lays out just aspirational goals of when using AI. And so human-centered is one that we've been talking a lot about. Transparency is another. But each of these are not bright line lines. It's very hard to define how exactly you should be transparent with AI use. Our MPs are using AI, most of them, all the time in making their communications that they send to the public. They don't put a disclaimer, AI helped me write this. Of course, the MP is not going to do that. But we have found that inside of our congressional offices of a particular MP, for example, they are demanding that of all their staff at every level, they're demanding that they disclose any AI usage. Because of course, if you're an editor, you want to know if a junior staffer used AI to make the draft or not. That changes the way you edit the document. So that's one way that transparency is working out with us. But also from institutional sources, we do take that transparency mandate seriously. So when we publish transcripts of a hearing that are AI generated, we absolutely disclose it to everyone involved that it was generated by AI. We even, as an institution, more and more, we're using AI generated images just for fun, like in all of the emails we send out and everything. And of course, we always tag them with, AI generated just to be transparent. So that's a sliding scale of transparency, but something we're always striving towards in our usage of AI.
Really good. Thanks very much, Stephen. And then Bruno, back to you, if that's okay, on the same question.
Eu acredito que foi falado, né, até que a questão do erro talvez seja uma coisa que a gente deva conviver, né, porque a IA vai errar. Eu acredito que sim, ela vai errar. O problema maior que a gente tem, assim como o humano erra, é quando a gente divulga essa informação, por exemplo, na transparência. Esse é um problema muito sério, porque se a gente divulgar uma informação incorreta saindo de um canal oficial, né, a gente tem uma autoridade de estar falando aquela informação. Então, isso pode se tornar um problema muito grande. Isso vai ir para a mídia, vai causar impacto político, pode causar em questões administrativas, pode gerar uma série de problemas de descrédito de todo o processo, né, quando a gente trabalha com a questão da transparência utilizando a inteligência artificial. Então, eu acredito que seja um risco muito grande, né, e por esse motivo que a gente sempre tem a questão da revisão humana, né, como um princípio, né, ao invés de simplesmente delegar isso. Isso é um grande problema para quando tu quer, por exemplo, disponibilizar um chatbot, né, porque ele pode ter grandes chances de cometer um erro numa resposta e isso impactar diretamente toda a imagem da instituição, né, e colocar todo o esforço em risco. Né? Mas o maior problema realmente é quando a gente parar de questionar a IA, a gente absorver tudo que ela disser como uma verdade. Eu acho que esse vai ser o maior risco se isso vier a acontecer. Né? A gente ter ela como o único oráculo da verdade. E vão ser vários oráculos, cada um vai escolher em qual o seu oráculo vai acreditar. E isso é uma coisa estranha de se pensar, mas atualmente todo mundo que pesquisa no Google, né, acredita naquilo que está sendo dito. Né, o Google já se tornou, de fato, ali quando ele gera aquele resumo, como uma referência do que é verdade ou não. Se o Google disser que é verdade, a maior parte das pessoas vai acreditar. Talvez vão haver os questionadores que vão ir mais a fundo numa pesquisa, mas eu estou falando da grande massa, que é o que, de fato, influencia a opinião pública, né, como um todo, que vai acabar tendo essa percepção muitas vezes errada. E a inteligência artificial vai fazer isso numa menor escala, dentro de um contexto, às vezes, de tomada de decisões. E isso é muito crítico, essa questão. Né? Então, a confiança excessiva, eu acredito que é um dos maiores riscos, tá? Eu acredito que quando ela dá um resultado, ele tem que ser totalmente explicável, o da onde veio esse resultado, da onde veio a informação, quais foram as fontes, qual raciocínio foi aplicado, evidências que sustentam a conclusão. Se a gente não conseguir explicar essa conclusão, então a gente não deve utilizar ela. Essa é a verdade, né? Atualmente, já existem os references, ali, as referências, enfim. Eu acredito que isso já deu uma certa facilidade da gente ir atrás de onde veio essa informação, e muitas vezes a gente vai atrás e vê que ela errou, né? Ela, de fato, não utilizou nada do que estava naquele documento. Por vezes a gente já percebe isso também que acontece. Então eu acredito que a tecnologia ela vai evoluir, né? Ela está evoluindo a passos largos, de forma exponencial. Eu acredito que, em questões de tempos, boa parte dos problemas hoje que a gente tem serão outros problemas que a gente vai ter, né? Cada vez que a gente resolve um, vão surgir mais 10 problemas para a gente lidar, principalmente problemas sociais, né? Problemas como aqui mesmo foi colocada a questão humana. Como vai ficar essa questão humana? Esse eu acho que é o maior problema, porque a parte técnica, em questão de alguns anos, vai estar, de certa forma, resolvida, ao meu ver, com o investimento todo que está sendo feito, com a competição toda que está em torno. Então, são vários grandes players investindo bilhões de dólares para que isso se torne uma ferramenta cada vez mais eficaz e cada vez mais permanente dentro do tecido social. Então, eu acredito que isso é uma questão de tempo para boa parte dos erros técnicos serem resolvidos. Né? Um problema grande que a gente tem hoje são os dados incorretos e defasados indo diretamente para dentro do parlamento agora. Né? Se você der dados ruins, ela vai te devolver uma resposta ruim. E se os dados não estiverem estruturados, não estiverem com uma sequência lógica para que ela possa entender, não basta você largar uma série de anexos dentro de um sistema de inteligência artificial. Ela não sabe qual veio primeiro, por exemplo. Eu largo lá várias emendas e algumas emendas se sobrepõem. Como é que ela vai saber qual veio primeiro, se eu não tiver uma linha do tempo para explicar essa sequência de fatos que ocorreram? Né? Então eu tenho que ter ali uma série de informações, metadados, para que ela possa compreender o que está ocorrendo. Não basta simplesmente largar documentos, nós precisamos dar dados para ela. E dados é diferente de documento. Isso eu vou fazer uma apresentação em outro painel, que a gente vai tocar bem nessa questão sobre a diferença dos dados estruturados, documentos, e aonde cada coisa se aplica. Né? E a governança, né, é um risco muito grande, porque a agêntica agora, especificamente, né, ela vai acessar diversos sistemas. Então ela vai ter que ter acesso, permissões, para fazer uma série de ações. Eu iniciaria dizendo que, como mitigar riscos, é somente dar acesso a informações públicas. Essas informações não são sensíveis, é como a gente tem lidado atualmente, né? Os nossos sistemas, eles acessam fontes de dados que já são públicas, então a gente reduz um pouco o risco, digamos assim, de acesso indevido à informação, mesmo que alguém tenha acesso a um prompt, um injection prompt, alguma coisa nesse sentido, as informações que ela tem acesso a gente são informações já de domínio público. Então a gente reduz muito o problema que possa ocorrer. Né? Então, se ela vai substituir empregos, cargos, pessoas, né, isso não é a pergunta correta. Eu acredito que o trabalho humano que vai se transformar quando essas tarefas repetitivas pararem de consumir tanto tempo. O que nós vamos fazer com esse tempo livre que vai ser criado? Essa que eu acho que é a grande preocupação, porque a gente vai ter tempo, nesse caso, para fazer análise, fazer a leitura, fazer a busca de informações, verificar esses dados e não apenas ficar procurando documentos, localizando informações. Né? A gente vai, de fato, analisar aqueles dados que já vão ter vindo de uma buscadora profissional, digamos assim, que a gente vai ter ao nosso auxílio para localizar esses documentos. Né? É um trabalho extremamente importante buscar esses documentos, mas que consomem, né, de fato, muito tempo. Né? Então eu não vejo, né, um futuro de humanos versus IA. A IA também ela não tem a questão da interpretação do contexto humano, a análise crítica, o contexto político, são muitas variáveis envolvidas dentro de um parlamento. Né? E seria muito difícil mapear todos esses sentimentos políticos, humanos, da sociedade em geral, para imputar isso numa IA para que ela tome uma decisão de fato concreta e precisa. Então, sempre o humano vai ser necessário na tomada de decisão a partir dos dados que ela vai informar. Né? Eu vejo, então, um futuro com os humanos potencializados pela IA, né? E eu tenho um dizer que eu falo, que é a melhor inteligência artificial, ela não é melhor do que um humano instruído usando a melhor inteligência artificial. Né? O ser humano utilizando inteligência artificial é muito melhor do que qualquer inteligência artificial já criada. Seria isso.
Very good. Thank you very much, Bruno. And we're just moving on to maybe closing remarks, if that's okay. And I'll work left to right, starting with you, Atho. But I might just take a couple of the aspects that Bruno brought up there, which are very interesting, because I was at a conference recently with some colleagues in the room here, and we had a presentation from a professor called Walter Quattrocchioli, and he was talking about AI becoming imbued with human characteristics and it being seen by many people as the arbiter of truth, and it was a filter layer that was being applied on top of information now in the human's experience. So I'm very interested, I suppose, to see if we can maybe layer that into the kind of closing questions we have. And so the closing remarks and questions are around, I guess, the next couple of years and what we see as the most realistic and valuable use cases for parliaments specifically. And then within that, the key principles and boundaries and responsibilities, a lot of which we've talked about already with governance, so revisiting them is fine. But we might just talk about that piece of, you know, how AI is being given human characteristics by people in their interactions with it, and increasingly being viewed as a companion in other ways and stuff like that, and how we might need to manage and mitigate against that in parliaments. I think even with the Ulysses project recently in the Parliament of Brazil, we saw how that was actually a measure in their own governance that they needed to account for and moderate and track as they began to roll out AI increasingly across the workforce. So sorry, that's a lot to leave on your closing remarks shoulders, but that's me always. And you can do it in 1 minute. No, please take your time. We're running over, and we will cut
What I
those
have
short.
to do very fast to speak or make some summaries. So I believe the most realistic and valuable use cases for artificial intelligence in parliaments and tools that support the people and their work rather than replace the decision making. In practice, that I think it means using the AI to help us to work faster, improve accuracy, efficiency, and build some stronger information base by keeping the just final responsibility firmly with the people. For me, the key principle is very clear. AI should be assistant, not decision maker, and at least not today yet. It can provide summaries, draft comparisons, and recommendations, and political choices, legal judgments, and different kind of procedural decisions, but must remain in the hands of elected representatives and responsible officials. In the future, AI may well take on more independent roles in the parliamentary work, but today it's still too early to rely on that with confidence. But I have to make a confession. We already 6 years ago replaced all our stenographers with AI. But the goal wasn't to replace just a human, so we were forced to do that because the Estonian labor market were lacking qualified specialists for this kind of work, and nobody wanted to do this kind of work anymore. So that was only option for us. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Atto. Kieran.
Okay, I'll try and compress as much into the remaining few minutes. Just to maybe work from bottom up, just in terms of the AI taking on various human characteristics, I think that's a direction of travel for AI systems. I think it's a welcome direction of travel. Since the dawn of AI, there's been the question of the alignment problem. How can we align artificial intelligence with human intelligence? So I think that anything that we can do to get some closeness and some proximity in relation to this is a good thing, and I think it will develop and improve over time. And when you look at the products developing today, you can see that trajectory. Maybe just to look at the principles, I agree with that in terms of, it's really important that human primacy is probably the most important principle that we ensure that we adhere to, and that decisions rest not with machines, but with humans and elected representatives and their officials. I go back to the questions of accountability that I mentioned earlier, because if you don't have clear ownership of who makes the decisions and the model for making the decisions, the accountability falls away. And I think those principles are very important. I've already touched, and indeed the panel has touched on explainability and transparency. I think also another principle that's going to be very important here are principles around sovereignty and security and the protection of data. I think, parliamentary settings have some of the most important national sovereign data sets around, and it's important that we have principles that respect those sovereignty characteristics and constraints. And then maybe just finally, in terms of principles, I would say that proportionality is a good principle to take into account here, that one uses AI systems where it makes sense to use AI systems, not just for the sheer sake of using them. And I think if you look at those principles and you look at some of the progress that has been made over the last number of years in terms of the adoption of AI in parliamentary settings, I think we're already on a good track in terms of what we're seeing and in terms of the adoption. I think we're going to see more AI systems being developed for orchestrating workflows, coordination around documents and approvals. I think we're going to see more work being done in terms of AI being used as a research assistant, especially in the agentic model. Agentic research agents are very, very powerful. There's hardly a presentation or a panel that I go to that I don't, maybe a week in advance, go to CoWork and Copilot and say, could you exhaustively research this topic for me, prepare a set of speaking notes, a deep brief, and a PowerPoint presentation, and I come back 20 minutes later and it's done. Now, I have to learn that, but it's a wonderfully useful tool. And I think also within parliamentary settings that, committee activities is going to be a very fertile area for the adoption of AI in terms of summarizing submissions, identifying themes and surfacing stakeholder perspectives. And then I think probably the holy grail in terms of AI usage in parliamentary settings is the drafting and structuring of legislation. And I appreciate that that is a contentious issue, but it will no doubt over time, I'm confident that AI will play a very, very central role ultimately in the drafting of bills and legislation. And I would just finish on a point, a little amusing anecdote. I'm sure most of you know that on the 15th of May, Pope Leo XIV's encyclical on Magnificat Humanitas was published, talking about the opportunities and the threats associated with AI. And I think as a policy paper, it did a very good job. But you may not have noticed that published last week on the 26th of May in a UK publication called The Verge, they had done an analysis of that encyclical and identified a number of paragraphs in it that were clearly AI generated. So I think that direction of travel for AI is a really component and constituent part of important frameworks that govern society. AI is going to be a major player in that in the future. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Kieran. Stephen.
Hilarious. Even the Pope is using it. I hadn't seen that. On the human face of AI, but that also is one of the principles that we have in our AI policy, and I'm sure many of you do too. Human decision making, human in the loop, however you phrase it. That's an important principle of using AI. It's come up with us recently in the issue that I'm sure has touched all of you as well, is using AI in the hiring process. So say whether it's us in the institution or whether an MP, has a job announcement and it's very competitive and prestigious to work for an MP. So you might get 1,000 resumes. Well, that's a great AI use case. Well, I don't want to read 1,000 resumes. AI, give me the 50 best out of the 1,000. Well, is that no human in the loop? Is that unfair to the 950 applicants that never even got viewed by anything other than an AI? Arguably it is. Does that violate our policy? So that's something we've been debating internally. It's an area where there is no bright line rule. It doesn't work. You have to work through the practicality of it. What if you, instead of it have just selecting the top 50, what if it just gives scores and ranks to the 1,000? Is that acceptable? Is that just not making decisions, but just aiding in your hiring process? These are tough questions. There's no easy answers, and the result might be different, per MP or per office, or and it's just things to think about, and how to apply that rule of having the human in the loop. And so it's something we're struggling with. I think we're leaning towards, assistive ranking and scores, as long as it's a detailed rubric that you provide. What's the AI making a decision based on? Is it just asking for, did you just ask it to give good applicants? Well, that's no rubric at all. But some offices actually have very detailed, extensive rubrics that they give to the AI to then review and so then by giving the detailed rubric, you're sort of participating in the decision more than the AI. So just interesting things to think through. I guess in closing, some of the exciting potential use cases, I think what we're seeing, one of the most exciting areas is in that committee knowledge or MP knowledge. So we're seeing a lot of what I told you at the very beginning when I was speaking of offices that are, vibe coding and making their own apps inside of offices, like individual MP offices or committee offices. I do think that there's a lot of future there. Say an MP that's in a parliament for 10 years, that's an wealth of information and history, and the staff turnover is really high, as you all know, I'm sure in all of your. So to be able to have an AI system that knows that MP or that committee and knows all the history and knows all the various intricacies, there's just lots of specialized knowledge that it's really hard for staff to sort of keep track of. Almost every vote we take is not a novel vote. Most of them we voted on the same thing last year or last month in committee or whatever. And it's really hard to keep track of all that information. And of course, the member wants all their votes to be consistent. So we see a whole lot of effort in that area. And I think that's a really promising area. It's just, AI is a very useful tool in organizing and making accessible large amounts of very specialized knowledge. So like a member's history is a good example. Where if you can actually build a little app that is able to store those vast knowledge that's in many different sources. It's in some of it's machine readable, like vote histories, but some of it's not. It's just collections of all the memos and documents, and a lot of it's messy. So getting that to work, a lot of that is a data project, is getting all the data sort of clean and accessible by the AI. And then to just iterate on the AI, just use it, and if it's not working and the results aren't as good as you want, well, you just got to keep changing its instructions to make it better. So I'll leave that as a good example that we're spending a lot of time on in the U.S. House.
Thanks very much, Stephen. And Bruno, to your closing remarks, if that's okay. Thank you.
Quanto às tecnologias, né, para os próximos 2 anos, eu acredito que a gente vai evoluir de uma forma bem exponencial, tá, num ritmo que vai ficar cada vez mais acelerado, né, eu diria. Esse ritmo acelerado que a gente vai ver, ele vai ser muito por conta da criação coletiva de soluções ao redor do mundo, né, que é muito maior do que a nossa capacidade de acompanhar tudo que está sendo criado. Eu diria que mesmo nós que estamos no mercado de tecnologia temos dificuldade de acompanhar, porque são muitas pessoas criando coisas no mundo inteiro, né? A gente vê muitas iniciativas open source, né, que são criadas por equipes espalhadas pelo mundo de soluções para tecnologia que resolvem problemas que até o momento não existiam soluções. Ontem mesmo, pesquisando ali, me surgiu uma solução que consegue já agora analisar dezenas de milhões de documentos com uma velocidade incrível. Então, assim, imagina, já está sendo criadas versões de novas tecnologias para resolver problemas de IA que hoje a gente não tinha até então solução. Né? Um serviço do Google, eles criaram uma versão open source para uma plataforma gigantesca do Google que custa muito caro. Então, enfim, estão surgindo novas soluções muito rápido. Então, é difícil, sim, precisar, mesmo por um curto espaço de tempo de 2 anos, o que de fato vai acontecer. Né? Toda essa nova onda da IA agêntica, né, ela inicia no momento, né, que a gente faz uma pergunta e antes de ele responder, ele faz o raciocínio. Eu acredito que esse foi o primeiro passo que surgiu, né, o reasoning, né, foi o que de fato possibilitou essa nova onda agêntica, que é ele não simplesmente sair ditando o próximo vetor, a próxima palavra, mas sim, antes mesmo de responder, ele pensar, olha, essa resposta poderia ser diferente, ele faz questionamentos, ele primeiramente gera os questionamentos, responde os questionamentos que ele mesmo fez, e assim ele vai até uma conclusão. Então, junto com isso, né, teve o MCP, que é o Model Context Protocol. Eu vou falar só isso tecnicamente, não vou falar mais nada técnico. Mas para vocês gravarem, isso é o que vai possibilitar todo o futuro, ao meu ver, dos próximos 2 anos, certo? Porque com isso, né, a gente consegue integrar sistemas legados, criar canais para comunicar com APIs, acesso a bancos de dados, diversas situações se tornam possíveis, que até então não eram possíveis. Ou se eram, era via RAG, né, que é aquela questão de buscar no banco de dados, injetar isso no prompt, etc. Né, que isso, quem já lida com IA há mais tempo, já ouviu falar alguma coisa nesse sentido. Com o MCP é um pouco diferente, porque quando ele está pensando na resposta, ele identifica, olha, tem aqui um local que eu posso buscar esse tipo de informação, e ele vai atrás dessa informação. Se ele não encontrar, ele pede de uma forma diferente, até que ele encontre, isso de uma forma autônoma. Isso é algo que não existia até então, certo? Então a gente está vendo uma transformação por conta dessas duas tecnologias, que abrem muita possibilidade. Além disso, os loops, né, que é ele ficar, digamos, trabalhando até que ele se convença que aquela resposta está satisfatória, né? Isso eles chamam de deep research, né? Alguns colocam aquele botãozinho de ativar a pesquisa demorada ali, que ele fica pensamento estendido. Nada mais é do que um loop que ele fica buscando diversas fontes de informação até que ele se convença de que aquilo é o suficiente, né? Então, eu acredito que toda a revolução, dando um passo adiante, que está sendo feita na área da programação, que é muito rápido, porque são os próprios programadores criando soluções para os seus problemas de escrita, vão se tornar soluções logo para problemas de escrita também de leis, não apenas de código. Eu acredito que vai chegar um momento, talvez não nos 2 anos, mas que boa parte das leis serão escritas de uma forma mais agêntica, digamos assim, pensando já num uso depois dessa tecnologia, certo? Por quê? Porque nada mais são do que a criação de regras. A gente cria conceitos similares, condicionantes, se tal coisa acontecer, isso deve ocorrer, ou deve ocorrer uma multa, ou etc. A gente já tem uma solução hoje implementada no mundo que se chama os smart contracts, que são utilizados em algumas redes de blockchain, como o Ethereum, por exemplo. Isso nada mais é do que a criação de uma regra, uma lei, que se automaticamente se executa. Isso vai se trazer ainda para dentro dos parlamentos, ao meu ver. Essa, talvez não em 2 anos, mas eu acredito que num futuro próximo isso possa ocorrer, né? Então, essa tendência de trazer tudo que está sendo feito em código para redação legal, versionamento, por exemplo, existe o Git, que é uma tecnologia para programação. Isso poderia ser levado também para leis. Tu pode fazer comparação ao longo do tempo de um texto legal, comparando documentos de texto, né? Um arquivinho de texto ali, tu consegue fazer essa comparação ao longo do tempo. Isso tudo já existe na programação. E eu acredito que isso vai ser levado para a parte legislativa também. Então, eu acredito que, além disso, né, indo agora para uma parte não tão teórica, mas sim prática já objetiva, né, ela vai participar das decisões diretamente, né, acompanhando as legislações de uma forma autônoma. Isso é muito simples de ser feito, né, de que ela possa acompanhar tudo o que está ocorrendo e, a partir dali, criar esse raciocínio, utilizando essas ferramentas que eu disse anteriormente, que até 3 anos atrás não estavam disponíveis, né? Então, veja como em 3 anos tudo muda, tudo se torna possível, né? A gente viu recentemente aquele serviço, o Open Cloud, acho que é o nome, que é um agente que fica executando um loop ali e ele fica demandando ele mesmo, pedindo mais coisas, né? Eu acredito que esse tipo de ferramenta vai ser aplicada não apenas para uso pessoal, mas no uso institucional também, como uma ferramenta de apoio ao processo. Eu vejo um futuro com uma ferramenta de IA institucional do parlamento que monitora essas situações da sociedade, busca dados de fontes de dados públicos, open data. Eu acredito que é uma tendência que vai ter que ser executada pelos parlamentos que desejam, de fato, se modernizar. Se eles não fizerem essa transição para abrir os seus dados, para que isso possibilite tanto que a sociedade quanto a própria equipe do parlamento crie soluções. Eles têm que buscar criar essas interfaces Não necessariamente criar a IA, mas criar as interfaces para que isso se torne possível, assim como está sendo feito em outros mercados. Estruturar a base para que todo o seguinte passo possa ser dado. Então, isso é o que eu acredito, né, numa amplificação e não substituição, né, do modelo atual. Né, ela vai ter algumas transformações estruturais, mas o conceito eu acredito que permaneça o mesmo, né, e ele tem que se permanecer, que é a instituição democrática. Sem isso, a gente perde tudo. Não podemos cair numa ditadura da tecnologia, digamos assim, da IA mandar no que nós devemos fazer. Isso é a única coisa que nós não podemos deixar acontecer. Todo o resto eu acredito que seja possível com uma tecnologia como um auxílio ao nosso trabalho humano. Seria isso.
Thank you very much, Bruno. So I think we won't have any closing remarks from me because we're running way behind time. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody from the panel sincerely. It was really interesting. I made loads of notes and I think some very topical things to actually pick up over the rest of the week, and even turns of phrase. I always find that very interesting, that when you come to a parliament, a gathering of parliaments, people have new ways of articulating problems that you are aware of but can't quite put the language on, and then you hear it turned out in a phrase and you go, that's it. So that's been very helpful for me, certainly around some of the talking points today. So thanks again, and everyone please give them a round of applause.